So welcome to Hell's Kitchen Cybersecurity, and today we're going to be talking about cybersecurity and potentially a new model for how we approach cybersecurity within an organization. When we think back on kind of the history of computers and the internet, it's undeniable the impact that it has had on humanity. Whether it was putting a person on the moon, sharing data in ways we didn't think possible, or now directly augmenting humans, it has been truly incredible to see. But we also know that as far back as 1970s, individuals started trying to exploit that power in order to monetary gain. And the concept of cybercrime was born when they started doing this. And we knew that we had to protect that value, and so we started developing antivirus in the 1980s. And with the development of antivirus came this concept of cybersecurity, which has now evolved from that one antivirus application to now it's a leading agenda item for most boards of directors and on investors' disclosures. And that growth wasn't by accident. As more and more businesses realized the number, size, speed, and destructiveness of cyber attacks were impacting their organization, they got worried about how they were going to continue to protect the value that they had worked so hard to create. And so businesses do what businesses always do when they run into a problem. They start throwing money at it in hopes of finding a solution. And so we went from that one antivirus application in the 80s to now the average large enterprise has over 50 different security tools. We went from one person managing a firewall to executive-led multidisciplinary teams of tens, even sometimes hundreds of people, all focused on cybersecurity. To put it into perspective, the cybersecurity spending just 6 years ago globally broke $34 billion. And at the time, that was this daunting number of how much we had started spending on cybersecurity. Just 6 years later, that has more than doubled and is expected to break $80 billion this year. It is undeniable the amount of money that is being funneled into cybersecurity. And this funny inflection point happened throughout that spending period as well, where we were able to make progress with the threat actors, and the number of attacks that were landing successfully started to decrease. That's a joke. If you have been around any organization, you know that's not true. In fact, all of this spending has had almost no impact on the number and the size of cybersecurity breaches that are occurring. Just in the past 6 years, that same amount of time from the increase in spending, the size of global cybersecurity losses has more than quadrupled. We are continuing to see an acceleration of those losses across the industry, and there is absolutely no indication that it is slowing down. Wherever we're spending all of this money, whatever we're doing with all of this extra attention, it's not working. To put it as simply as possible, we're losing. Aside from the governance challenges that I think are a huge part of that challenge, I think a primary driver behind us not being as successful as we would like to be in cybersecurity is based on the way that most cybersecurity organizations are structured within the larger business. When you look back at how cybersecurity grew, the vast majority of it was reactionary. The organization would have some new idea, some new technology, some new business process that they wanted to implement, and we would see a constant stream of threats that were associated with whatever the business was trying to do. And so we would plug and play this really cool technology and give it a fancy name or an acronym like CASB, SIM, ATM, TVM, SSPM, and plug that in order to try to get ahead of the threats that had now been created as part of this new technology. And the problem with that is that we are turning ourselves into glorified quality assurance. And I know that's challenging to hear for fellow security professionals, but if you take a second and think about it, how much of our cybersecurity team's time is spent finding something that the organization did that created a vulnerability or otherwise did something they weren't supposed to do, triaging it, and then one of three things. We either monitor it for exploitation, we work with them to fix it, or in some cases, we have to go fix it ourselves. That's exactly what quality assurance does. It's also created this kind of uncomfortable dichotomy between our IT teams and our cybersecurity teams, where they are able to pretend to be the proverbial idiot sandwich and say, that's not my problem, that's a security problem. And we run into that all the time. I don't need to know how to develop code that doesn't have OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities in it. Security will find them and close them. I don't need to secure APIs. Security's going to secure them. We see this over and over and over across all of IT, and it isn't working. So I think it's time for us to look at a new model for cybersecurity and how it plays out across the organization. But first, let's talk about a kitchen. I want everyone to imagine that you own a restaurant, not just any restaurant, a fancy one. This is where people are paying $100, $200 a plate minimum to come eat at your restaurant. You've got your Michelin star, you have your great service, and people enjoy coming there. Now, in order for you to have that type of a fancy restaurant, customers have to be able to trust you to provide two things. Number one, they have to trust that the food you are going to provide to them is going to be something extraordinary, that it's worth that money they paid for it. Whether it's a perfectly cooked steak, whether it's your sides are amazing, whether your salmon is smoked just right, that has to be a great experience. And the other thing that they're going to expect and trust you to provide is that you're not going to make them sick. It's the fastest way for a restaurant to get shut down or customers to stop coming is when they start experiencing symptoms after attending your restaurant. And in order for that to happen, it requires you to focus on food sanitation, keeping hands clean, wiping down food preparation services, keeping food temperatures at the appropriate levels. All of that plays into ensuring that your customers do not get sick. But now let's imagine that your restaurant has started struggling with that. You've made some of your customers sick, and it's causing problems. It's taking away from your revenue. So you call in Gordon Ramsay to come in and fix your restaurant and help make sure that you can start delivering that quality food again. But instead of helping your restaurant to start serving better, safer food, Gordon just starts doing all of the work himself. He starts wiping down tables, he's washing everybody's hands, he's checking all of the food temperatures, he's making sure there's no cross-contamination. And as a result of that, your food is not getting out in time. It's taking forever because it's just Gordon who needs to be there doing all of these things. That's exactly the way we have built cybersecurity today. The kitchen from hell, where there's the cybersecurity team sitting at the middle of it all, making sure that everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing. What if we tried a different approach? What if we started structuring our organization similar to the way a normal kitchen operates? What if every single person in that kitchen instead were responsible for ensuring that we do not make our customers sick? What if the chefs are responsible for ensuring that they wash their hands and keep food at the appropriate temperature? What if the servers were responsible for appropriately wiping down tables and making sure their hair doesn't get into food? This is the way a normal restaurant operates. What if we applied that same model to cybersecurity, where everyone in IT was responsible for cybersecurity instead of just a centralized cybersecurity team? What would that look like? It might look something like this. We would have a software development team that is no longer responsible for just delivering code, but delivering secure code. We would have QA teams that are responsible for dynamic and static code testing, and not just for functionality, but for security, for API scanning. We would have infrastructure teams that are responsible for scanning their own infrastructure, triaging those vulnerabilities, and then remediating them as part of operations. We would have desktop teams that are similarly responsible for vulnerabilities within the desktop environment. They're also responsible for configuring those endpoints using the exact same CIS standard that our security teams are using today. Our identity team would be responsible for not only ensuring that identities work, but understanding modern attack techniques against identities and inserting appropriate friction throughout the identity and authentication process. They'd be responsible for ensuring privileged access rights are used appropriately. And then our GRC team would be broken up across the organization based on function. For example, your compliance officer, your enterprise risk management team, and your privacy department. And in order for that to work, it requires us to do more than just change who owns that particular function. It's easy to just say, okay, now you're responsible for doing vulnerability scanning. In order for that to be effective, we also need to make sure that we are changing the definition of success for that role. For example, most developers in most organizations, one of their key performance metrics is the number of lines of code that they have delivered within their organization for whatever app that they're working on, the number of modules that they've shipped into production. What if we started gauging them on the number of vulnerabilities that they created within that application? What if we started grading them based on the number of times that their code had to be patched or reworked because it was built insecurely? What if our infrastructure teams started being measured on the number of vulnerabilities that they patched? How quickly they were able to patch them, just like we do with our vulnerability management teams in cybersecurity today. We could even gauge our desktop teams based on how securely they had configured each of the endpoints based on that CIS benchmark. You can easily see that we're taking a lot of the exact same measures that we currently measure the success of cybersecurity, and we're just applying them to individuals and organizations across the entire IT department. There's a lot of benefits to an approach like this. We talked about how difficult it would be to run a restaurant and run a kitchen if you have one person running around doing all of those things like we do with cybersecurity today. Because each of those individuals no longer have any responsibility, and so they're never going to be engaged in the process. In order for it to be successful, those individuals closest to handling food are going to be the ones that need to be responsible for ensuring that that food stays sanitary. Everyone needs to get in the game. This is a similar thought process with cybersecurity. These are the individuals closest to the technology. These are your application admins, your server administrators, your software developers. They live and breathe this technology today. Who better to be directly involved in ensuring that that technology is secure? It also allows the organization to be more agile and ship things faster, because instead of sitting at the finish line, waiting for the cybersecurity team to approve you going to production, you've now baked those cybersecurity processes directly into how the organization operates. Nobody can play the idiot sandwich anymore. It is part of their job. It's a part of their success metrics, and it's a part of how they're expected to deliver. So let's say that I have completely convinced you that this is the right way to go forward. A very fair next question is, how do we get there? How do we get from where we are today with our centralized cybersecurity teams towards a distributed model? It starts with checking our egos. We as a cybersecurity industry have become very enamored with ourselves the past 5 years. We've kind of become the cool kids on the block. We're in the news all the time. We have a bunch of new money coming into our organization. Our orgs have gotten significantly larger than they were 5 years ago. And in many cases, we have fooled ourselves into believing that cybersecurity is a skill that normal IT people aren't able to learn or do. And so we continue to build these larger teams. We're fooling ourselves when we think along that process, especially considering most of us came from IT backgrounds before cybersecurity was a dedicated role. Security, like anything else, is a skill that needs to be learned and taught. And it's just that IT people have never been responsible for cybersecurity or never been taught cybersecurity, and so they have no reason to be engaged in it. But it absolutely can be done. We also need to start slow. This is a complete revamping of how security would be approached within an organization. And anytime you're innovating and revamping, we're going to run into resistance. Not only resistance from the IT people who are now accountable for things they've never been accountable before, but also from inside our cybersecurity team. This is different. This is new, and in some cases, they may view it as taking away their power. It's important that we start slow so that we can build momentum behind it. Start with just a single function. Maybe start with software development and migrating application security and software development into a single function. Maybe you start with infrastructure and vulnerability management and merging those together. This allows you to start at a level that is palatable for your organization and learn as you go while implementing these new processes. And then finally, we need to ensure alignment. And I've talked about this a couple of times already. People are inherently self-serving. They are only going to do what benefits them, which means that if there is not alignment to their performance metrics or their bonuses, their incentive for raises and promotions, they will not do it. You absolutely have to ensure that there is alignment between incentives for each of those employees and the outcomes that you are expecting. For example, within the health system, we are currently rewriting every single job description across all of IT to ensure that employees within IT, especially those with privileged access rights, who do not bake security into their processes, will not be bonus eligible when it comes time for annual bonuses across our organization. This is a fundamental shift to where now they can no longer throw it over the wall to security. It's their job as well. That alignment is the key to making any of the rest of this work because it ensures that people are invested in the success of the security efforts. Like we said at the beginning, we have not been effective as an industry. We're spending a lot of money, we are burning through cash, and we are not slowing down the volume and the size of breaches that are occurring across the industry. I think it's time that we take a step back and look at the way we deliver cybersecurity within an organization and think of a new way to deliver it that gets everyone in the game. It's time that we did something different because what we're doing today has not been effective and continues to not be effective. It's time for us to make a change. Thank you again, everybody, for your time today. Would love to talk to you later, and I'll be around the rest of the afternoon.